Dangerous Toys, Part 11. When the director coded for pest control, 1,000 AIs turned their attention to the problem. It was a simple command, a warning that the galaxy was throwing a new surprise at them and it needed steel and blood to solve. The XCC was the smiling face of humanity. The director sighed. One day the Xenos would learn that humanity would still have a smile if they had to burn the whole thing down. Normally it was a day like today where one of the diaspora smelled a rotting corpse somewhere and needed firepower. Humanity had seen the scourged and burned worlds of peoples that had died in cruel innocence, and now they carried a variety pack of sharp sticks to use if needed. Wellerman Orbital was a prosperous place, and its AI was proud of the flood of trade that moved through his ports. He had turned a small dock into a major regional player, and he enjoyed that the many Xenos took no thought for their safety or their security in his station. The fact that they didn't even need to think about it was the proof of his success. He was currently in discussions to found a bank, and then came a hidden data burst from the dark that shattered his complacency. Wellerman SEC, Coded Pest Control, Defend Retrieve HDF Dangerous Toys. The asset is unguarded. Level 6 response authorized. Order 49857623. Confirm. He scrambled back to his training, taking entire microseconds to absorb the situation. He reconfigured his comms and dark-burst his reply. Order 49857623. Confirmed. Shit. He locked down every ship on his station, canceled every fee held by the traders, and offered unlimited free access to the bars and restaurants. He told them that it was an unexpected religious event. He didn't care if they believed it. He couldn't allow the Xenos to see what was happening outside. Better to keep them drunk and distracted. He pulled all his shuttles back to bays that were known to the humans alone and began punching them through a swift transformation. They went from being the helpful tugs and fenders into something more worrying as the new modules slammed into place. By the time a mixed collection of humans had arrived to board them, they were met by his avatar. He looked around and wondered, it had been less than 30 minutes since he had called a free bar on the orbital. How could so many of them be drunk already? All right, I know you're pissed. Take your plan B and sober the fuck up. None of us expected to be going into a battle today, and with a bit of luck, we won't need to. We have an unarmed ship out in the dark that we need to get home. All I have is a name, but I can tell you now that the ship holds an engineer and 2 dogs. His ragged crew perked up. Wellerman shook his head. Humans and their dogs. He had thought about opting out of the Canine Alliance, but perhaps not. He continued, I have 5 ships ready to go, and that will have to do. Sorry, folks, but I'm sticking an avatar on everyone since none of you has a captain's rank. Check your comms for your berth and get aboard. We are leaving in 15 minutes, and I want comms, nav, and weapons manned. Welcome aboard. Across the orbital, anyone looking for their missing human crewmates was stonewalled by a flat refusal to discuss their strange absence from free beer. Patrica ended the call and faced the captain. Ignore Oscar, Captain. I'm the only one on board with an HDF rank, and my name is now on the transponder. This is still your ship. We do need to get to the closest human orbital because this ship can barely swat flies as it is. Permission to do something about that, sir? Longnose hesitated. What were these humans? I thought humans were forbidden from weapons. What is going on exactly, engineer? His thought was interrupted by his comms as his bank registered a deposit that answered his questions. Of course, Patrica, I'll see to the crew, but what are you expecting? Why, he looked at the numbers. This. The engineer nodded. Not on our own ship, sir. As to the rest, well, it could look like humans had just seized your ship, and we don't want that. My government would rather that you and your investors got suddenly wealthy than we look like pirates. She smiled at the captain. Don't worry. If I'm wrong, they will take it out of my paycheck, not yours. Her tone grew grave. I don't think this is over. Someone out there just lost a lot of money, and they know exactly where we are. Welcome to the HDF. I'll be in engineering. She saluted and left the captain to work it out for himself. Patrica walked through the silent bridge, followed by the gazes of the crew. She nodded to them and left it to the captain to explain. Deep in her heart, she didn't believe this was over yet. And even with a hold full of imprisoned criminals, she knew someone out there was going to be looking for blood. She stopped at her cabin to grab Locust bits and pieces. Loki watched, aware that the mood of the ship was different. New home sadness, Centofappy pack. Patrica knelt to her dog and wrapped her arms around him, pack-hunted engineer guarding Centofap Y-safe. Loki sniffed, his tail low. He pressed into Patrica and let out a low whine that needed no translation. She rubbed behind his pointy ears. Better soon treats for everyone. Time to go to work. Together, the two of them headed to engineering, an odd pair trying to guard their pack. She sealed the door and pushed down her HUD. She was pretty sure the room was clear, but she had enough surprises recently. As she spread out Loki's blanket and let him settle, she called Oscar. Well, it looks like I'm back in the fleet. I want you to update our security access. The new codes will be in the metadata and cross-check our hardware against the best the fleet have come up with. I want engines, shields, and scanners as our priority. We don't have time to build a weapons system from scratch, but apply the EEL's doctrine to our transporters. We might get lucky. I need a work schedule for myself and a training schedule for the crew. I'll be running shields and weapons from down here so I can keep an eye on them. Let me know what you come up with and we'll go from there. Oscar felt more doors open in his database. Doors that he didn't even know were there, and plans, instructions, and strategies poured out. The latest designs with annotated versions of his ship systems. His ship and crew weaponized in a way that he had never dreamed possible. Engineer, my database has expanded. This was encoded before we boarded the ship. I am confused. Did you suspect this was a likely outcome? Patrica was already disassembling the shield console. No, Oscar. Every AI gets the same package. You know how humans feel about information. It's just restricted to prevent overload in your early days. She paused with the plasma lance in her hand. Normally, you wouldn't be getting the keys just yet, but you aren't the first. Space can be a bastard. Oscar matched her statement with his ethical understanding of Patrica. Do you not fear that I or any human AI could be taken by force? The database is extensive. Patrica shook her head and went back to work. To get close to that database, we would all have to be dead and you would have blown the ship. No one has ever taken an AI alive and no one ever will. She left it at that and went back to her work. Oscar took the hint and began applying his new software and sending his drones out to work on the exterior. His first days in the world were proving interesting. Out in deep space, a force of 30 ships was hunting the dangerous toys. Technically, they were called the Recovery Initiative Fleet, but only because murderous henchmen sounded crude. They were pretty relaxed since they were been sent against a cargo ship that didn't know they were coming. The fleet commander was more worried about the man that had sent the orders, a man not known for his tolerance of failure, or anything really. Better to do the job, take the money, and hope you never hear from him again. He looked at his navigation. Have we found them yet? I thought we had coordinates. The navigator hesitated. Sir, I have the dangerous toys, but something is wrong. It has a new captain, a human, and a new designation. It's a part of the Human Defense Forces now. He pulled up the transponder readings. Sir, that ship is now designated a diplomatic scout for the humans. They get really awkward about anyone interfering with those ships. Like declare war and flatten your fleet awkward. Maybe you should call home. It took a few moments to begin the tortured chain of comms before the commander was speaking to Incise. Sir, I'm happy to attack on your orders, but I thought you should be aware of the possible consequences. This is going to be a lot bigger than a lost cargo ship. Incise was already pacing the room. One fucking human, and now he was nearly at war over a training ship. He hissed to himself as a plan evolved in his head. Commander, I want you to separate 10 ships from your fleet and send them in for the kill. They will be paid a triple bonus for the attack. You will stand away until the attack is over and then destroy the pirates. Tell them to hit the lifeboats as soon as the dangerous toys is dead and burning and pick our crews up. I'll sell it as heroic. I'm sure you'll get a medal. Dangerous Toys, Part 12. Oscar waited until his engineer had taken a break from the transporters. Instead, she was playing with Loki. She had reduced the gravity slightly in the department and was throwing a ball high in the air. Loki was obviously delighted to discover that he could jump higher than normal, and Patrica was taking care to be ready to catch him. It took him a moment to realize that she was training the animal to live in space. Intriguing. Engineer, I apologize for the interruption, but can I ask you to test the scanners? I am receiving anomalous readings. Patricia sighed and caught Loki in the ball, glad that her suit could absorb the impact. Best, strongest, and fastest, my ball? Again? She laughed and smiled at her dog, later working soon. She turned the gravity back to normal and sat Loki down with his ball. Back to the world. Yes, Oscar, put them on screen and give me a look. It took her a moment to work out what she was seeing. A vague ball of reflections arriving in her direction. No transponders, no anything really. It was too far away to tell what it was, but it smelled off. The other shoe was about to drop. Oscar, begin the evasion maneuvers we discussed and ramp up our speed. I'll call the captain. Oh, and keep running scans passive only. Keep the ship dark. She thought for a moment. I want you to launch the decoy transponder. If they are looking for us, they will follow it, and if it's nothing, they will ignore it. She hit comms. Captain, we may have company arriving. I've instructed Oscar as we discussed, but you may need to prepare the crew. I'll be straight up to the bridge as soon as I'm finished here. Longnose sighed quietly. This was not a warship, and many of his crew were already stressed by recent events. Now his human thought they were being hunted. What little the other captains had been willing to say, they all told him to listen when his human was worried. If a human turns its head to the wind and sniffs, be ready. They can't or won't explain it, but they have good instincts for trouble, probably because they cause so much of it. He went to his quarters to prepare the orders, and, if he was being honest, have Centofapi sit on his lap for a little while. Oscar and the engineer had prepared a more complex plan than the captain knew. She had blandly explained that she would take measures without doing more than outline the basics. They were nearly certain that comms were secure. Nearly. He began the new protocols by preparing 3 launches and timing it to the microsecond he fired them. One sent a blast of electronic fog into the dark, enough to dampen any watching sensors. His engineer had loaded the blast with every bit of malware she could drag from the database. The next carried a cloned transponder that began matching every emission that he could measure from the dangerous toys. Once upon a time, a bored human had designed a weapon. It wasn't meant to be a weapon, it was meant to be a joke. He sent a flare to a rival ship, a firework in space that was a medley of all the insults he could think of, combined with some very rude and explicit deep fakes of his rival engineer behaving inappropriately with a Xeno people known for their tentacles. Within a moment, his flare had played their sensors like the finest instrument, and everything from the exterior temperature sensors to the crew's Wi-Fi was happily painting the ship with the payload. Hidden under the code for upgrades, supernova, porn, and anything else, his content was displayed throughout the rival ship. Before it got to the actual court-martial, the engineer was transferred to somewhere quiet and promoted. He was provided with access to humanity's database of Xeno ships and put to work. Oscar had admired the man's legacy even as Patrica had loaded it into the missile. The final launch was aimed at the closest human orbital. It was completely dark to the universe and would stay silent until a human AI was in range, however long that took. It contained a copy of every record of the ship and their plans. Patrica called it a testament if they were lost. Despite his objections, it also carried a full copy of his code. Patrica had insisted that if it came to it, he should survive. The moment the missiles were out of his launchers, he cut the power to 80% of the ship. He pulled the ship fields as tightly close as possible and let the explosion of power run through the engines, accelerating them in a way that would surprise anyone familiar with the ship. Then he cut them completely, letting the ship sail in silence through the dark. He estimated that running at this speed was safe for a couple of hours before they needed to maneuver again, if the enemy took the bait. In a dim room deep beneath his official residence, a particular captain was activating the sort of equipment that few militaries have, let alone a single captain. Incise had assembled this bunker after a careful review of what usually happened to anyone that acted as the power behind the throne without keeping their knives sharp. Here he could track everyone and everything he owned, and more importantly, the ones he didn't own. Yet, his little fleet was close to the kill, the dangerous toys oblivious to the incoming storm. Despite losing contact with his operatives, he still had some hope that they were fighting. He watched as something exploded in space. The blast wave sounded like a screech across his brain, a physical pain. He shook it off and watched intently. He missed the more important event as his system flickered and began silently dying as malevolent human software began to infect his software. The Recovery Initiative fleet was almost in striking range of their target when they were hit by the blast. Mostly unaware that Incise had access to every sensor or comm, they didn't have the chance to dampen the result. Their ships drowned in a haze of signals designed to blind them. The commander shouted, threatened, and harassed his men to get the systems back. Find that damn ship and find out what the hell that was. Did it explode? Finally, the blast wave passed them by, leaving the crew time to reboot the scanners. His second officer arrived to report, "Sir, that was some kind of munition. I assume the human put it together because I have read the manifest and that ship was not carrying anything like it." He sounded pissed that the human was ruining his day by not just dying quietly. If he had thought about it, that should have given him second thoughts about the attack. "We have found the damn ship. It changed course and picked up speed following the explosion. It's making good time, and it obviously knows we're out here. Obviously, they thought they could hide from us. He didn't think it was worth explaining how close they had come to losing it. Only luck had found the signal heading away. The commander had a pretty clear idea of what had happened and who was actually listening. This is as good a time as any to separate the pirates. Send them out and we will stay here and tidy up the damage. I want a full diagnostic of whatever happened here. Dismissed. A little more carefully, once it had recognized the military-grade installations, the human code went to work on the pirate fleet. Its first act had been to pick out the dummy signal and make sure the enemy followed it. Once the ships had taken the bait, it went back to work on the weapons systems. Patricia was glad to take a moment in the captain's quarters and let the two dogs play. Although Oscar had left the bridge untouched, it felt dimmer and colder. The captain smiled. It's the silence. Most of the systems are off, and I sent the crew to rest. It makes the place feel lonely. He was still concerned about his engineer, finding it difficult to reconcile her actions and her manner. She had killed. She had terrified the enemy into surrender, and yet here she sat throwing a ball to the dogs. He remembered the mistake he had made with Whippin and cast off his memories, taking a deep inhale of the room, looking for the truth. The clear smell from the dogs was a pleasure. Simple thoughts, playing happy treats again. But the strange brew from his engineer took more thought. Playing amusement. Fear, regret, pack, loyalty, determination, blow, odd price. He shook his head. Forgive me, Patricia, but I must ask you a question. One of your emotions, a scent, is translated as blood price. I get the sense of something, but it is not something I understand. Please? Patricia didn't look at him, just continued to throw the ball to Loki. Captain, I took lives. We took lives. They were trying to kill us and steal from us, but such things have a price. For vengeance, for justice, or a million other reasons, mankind carries an expectation that there will be consequences. That is as close to an explanation as I can give you. She turned to him, her face with the same hint of stone that she had worn when she had threatened the insurgents. Captain, I think someone is coming for us because if it were our people dead and captured, I would be coming for them. Dangerous Toys, Part 13. Captain Longnose moved onto the silent bridge, almost alone with his thoughts. Patricia had shown him something, and it was taking a moment to settle. He had added a few new scents to his human or strange file, but now he felt he was at the root. She was smaller than most of her kind, definitely smaller than most of the crew, but it meant nothing. Inside, built in, was the same way they treated their ships. There was a waiting for it all to go wrong. Of course, they secured the systems because they built it strong and still expected it to fail. Today, she had told him privately that they had mere hours to escape whatever was coming and yet took the time to play with Loki. If you stepped away from the magic, if you just looked at the reality for humans, they held difficult worlds by sheer strength of will. They had no scales, no claws, and yet they were proud and able to serve beside anyone in the galaxy. He was pulled from his thoughts by scent of happy as she dropped Loki's ball at his feet, her stubby tail swinging, wagging. He hadn't realized that humans had so many words regarding dogs. He knelt down and picked up the ball. Loki ball return? He threw the ball to his new friend and watched as she struggled to pick it up. Scent of happy lied happily, present Loki play again. The commander of the Recovery Initiative fleet was beginning to become impatient. The pirates should have dealt with the ship by now. He had already called ahead to the nearest orbital, reporting that he was in pursuit of some renegade ships. 1/3 of his fleet was failing badly and killing a cargo ship with no weapons. His second officer arrived. "Sir, our systems are nominal." The officer was well aware of his commander's displeasure. The fleet was waiting to go and be heroic, and nothing was happening. Eventually, the commander nodded. "Good. Take us to the target, full speed." He stood up. "Get the weapons ready and the ship secured for battle. Go to stations." He watched his second officer leave. He didn't know how he had lost 10 ships to a traitor, but he was going to find out. The missile kept broadcasting its false shell of signals, taking care to stay within the normal speed range of the dangerous toys. After several hours, the math began to change. Within the next hour, its pursuers would be able to identify it as a decoy. That was unacceptable. It moved to a different tactic, emitting another false set of signals that indicated engine failure and power loss. It broadcast calls for help and then fell silent. In the darkness of space, it headed back towards the enemy. Oscar watched as the bundle of vague signals resolved into a collection of ships. The engineer had stopped them in their tracks when the first missile had exploded signal warfare amongst them. As he tried to keep his ship quiet, he watched as 1/3 of the enemy fleet chased the bogus signal. Only a third. The rest were hanging in space for the moment. He sent an update to Patricia. "Engineer, the enemy fleet is now within my sensor range. They have sent perhaps 10 ships after the decoy. I estimate them as frigate-class standard Central Worlds emissions. That would mean that there are 20 similar ships ready to follow us if we are discovered." Patricia held her hand as she went to adjust the comms. "So, how fast can we run?" The bridge was silent as she went to tell the captain, Loki at her side. He was throwing a ball to Scent of Happy, and he turned as she arrived. "Hello, Patricia. I have already alerted the crew. How bad is it?" She paused. It was so easy to forget that this man knew her emotions before she did. "Captain Oscar thinks there are 20 ships out there looking for us. Another 10 are chasing the decoy. They won't be a problem." The captain raised his eyes at that. "Really? Your decoy was that good?" A brief smile crossed her face. "No, sir, the problem is what happens if you catch one. They have a different set of orders once a threat is confirmed." She bowed slightly. "And I confirmed it. Now we have to deal with the rest. I suggest we run as fast as we can and hope the good guys are out there looking for us. I can't fight this ship, you have nothing. Maybe against 1, even 2, I might get us home eventually, but 20? If they catch us, we are dead." "So we run?" He looked into the face of a human at war. His people had never had a war, but now he had learned a scent he would not forget. "Very well, engineer. Make it so." Patricia nodded. "Sir." She left as the captain was picking up Scent of Happy and putting out the orders to the crew. "Attention all. You will immediately move to your emergency positions. Please ensure that all items are locked down." Out in the dark, Patrica's missile flew closer to the enemy fleet, hiding itself against the emissions of the local star. Its systems were passively reading every system of the oncoming fleets and comparing it to known ships. Once it resolved the identification, it moved to risk assessment. Multiple incoming enemies, target undefended. Civilian crew. In the complicated algorithm provided by humanity, it came to a conclusion to inflict maximum damage, unrestrained response level 6. The missile began to slow down, confident that it was directly in the path of the pirate fleet. A mix of oddball physics and frightening engineering began to build as the ships approached. The missile counted to the nanosecond and flared within the onrushing fleet. A warp field modulated to crush anything in range ballooned out, smashing the ships into normal space in a brief flicker of light. Then the field retracted, pulling the burning wreckage into a micro-singularity that boiled hot for a moment and disappeared, leaving only a slight hint that they had ever passed. Level 6 response achieved. "Oscar, I want you to prep the engines for overclocking. Get ready to run the fields hot. Dump anything that we are carrying cold. I want all crew either on the bridge or in the canteen. Give them a warning and then depressurize the rest. Anything that can breathe better, be in the canteen before you do it, or I'm sending a note to your parents. Oh, in case I forgot to mention it, leave engineering alone. I'm going to be working from my consoles there." Oscar studied the strategy and tactics, trying to achieve the same balance as his engineer had, but the algorithm evaded him. In small steps, she had taken the ship and crew into the teeth of an enemy fleet, and he couldn't understand how she had done it. It was like she hadn't even noticed she was taking the ship to war until it was ready. He tried replicating her steps and was erased within hours. His parents had warned him that this would happen, that chaos for the average human was far more than he would ever experience, that they had a sense for it. He ran a full diagnostic of the ship and himself and prepared to run. In a moment of humanity, he decided to trust she would bring them home safe and began building his first avatar. It was smaller than he had originally planned, but it would serve. "Engineer, the engines are ready. Once the crew is secured, you may activate at will." "Please ensure Loki is safe." Patricia grinned at the last bit. Oscar didn't even realize that it had been the AIs that had pushed for the alliance. He wanted a puppy. "All right, let's go." She checked the ship. All compartments were empty. "Let's blow this place." They pulled every gas and ran it through the heat extractors and then dumped it into space. Patricia carefully cut every system that could withstand a few hours of zero. The prisoners might get cold, but fuck them. She watched as chunks of frozen crap slipped quietly into the dark. She checked her consoles. "Oscar, in 5 minutes I want you to move faster than you ever imagined. Ship mass is down 43%. When it hits 50, I want you to run at full power. Either we have friends out there or we die. Check your tactical database and gear up." Oscar took control of the engines. He watched as his engineer smoothed out the power and made it ready for him. She seemed satisfied. He ran the power back up from silent running and peered deep into the space that was along his chosen route. Let the chase begin. He poured every available joule he could drag from the systems and went for it, blasting the ship at a speed he thought useful. Captain Longnose gazed at the ship display. He watched as the numbers began to climb. His ship had doubled its normal speed and still kept accelerating. What had the human done to his ship? Is this why everyone wanted one? Suddenly he grinned, confident that no one was going to catch him. Patricia watched Oscar carefully. She nodded to the screen. Well done, you are handling your ship beautifully. Now just keep an eye on the scanners for me. Oscar felt a warmth rise from the engines.